Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello, everybody. How you doing today? It is Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018. I'm guilty on 19 counts of not being ready for the show. But, it's okay. I'm going to get pardoned. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get away with this. Just had to dash upstairs, grab a couple of Excedrin. Got a little bit of a headache today. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's all the indictments and guilty pleas and convictions that came in yesterday. And, gosh, there are so many of them. It's going to be hard to keep up. Luckily, we have Greg Dworkin joining us this morning with a roundup of stories that will probably, I think, include all of these things. And, man, it's really going to be difficult to catch up and make sure we have all of them. I mean, of course, there's Michael Cohen. Of course, there's Paul Manafort. But there's also Duncan Hunter we have to keep up with. And I don't even know if anything new is happening with Collins and his insider trading. It's just it's raining indicted Republicans all over the place. We've got the Michael Cohen plea agreement, which we could thumb through, which might be fun because apparently he's just, they've gone ahead and basically, I laughed out loud. If you did the same thing, maybe you know what I'm talking about right off the bat. Laughing out loud, looking at how they dance around actually naming Donald Trump in the Cohen documents, in his plea agreement, and I guess what would have otherwise been the indictment. And so now he's what do they call him? I forget what they're calling him these days, but not individual one. But at any rate, yeah. So I mean, he was referred to as at various points that he did these things, intentionally violated the law at the direction of a candidate for federal office. And where do they? I will have to pull it up. But at some point, they actually refer to his client, who's now president of the United States, or who later became president of the United States. It's a pretty narrow class. I think we know who they're talking about there. And, man, there's even more, actually. We've got a story about Congressman Vern Buchanan, who I feel like we've heard the story before, and I assume we heard it from the people reporting it this time, and we'll see. I guess maybe some new records have been released that prove that the things they said about him last time this came up are true, but it's like dirty Republicans falling off cliffs all over the place. Vernon Buchanan, the one who went out and bought himself a yacht the very day that he had voted to pass the gigantic Trump tax cuts. And now it turns out that the loan for the yacht came from a foreign bank that was lobbying him on the tax bill that he voted for. It's a real mess. It's as if they were in it for the crime and very little else, because there's just apparently nothing else going on in their lives. I don't know where they find the time for all this stuff, in between golf and stealing Hawaiian shorts and amazing snippets that will share with you today. Of course, much more going on as well, but I guess that's got to be the top news, and a lot of people are very excited about this. And I suppose it's possible that, I don't know. I mean, do you really want to you really want to lay odds on whether the tide, whatever that is turning? It's hard not to. It's hard not to believe it could, in fact, finally be happening. One of the New York Times resident, I guess, would you say they're token conservatives? I mean, they may be, their ranks may be fuller of actual conservatives sometimes, you think, than we might otherwise believe over at the New York Times. But I guess Bret Stephens is there now. People sharing with me this morning the tweet from him. I've been skeptical about the wisdom and merit of impeachment. I have not. But then again, you've been skeptical about the wisdom and merit of taking climate change seriously. Okay, all right. We don't need to go off down that path, I guess. But he says Cohen's guilty plea changes that. The president is clearly guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors. he should resign his office or be impeached and removed from office. I agree, but I guess, I don't know. It's irritating, of course. Bret Stephens, seeing his name is irritating. And of course, we're supposed to, the sooner we get Greg here, the better, because as you know, we're supposed to like reach out and take this. Look, when they come around to it and someone changes their mind and is willing to say so, you embrace that. That doesn't mean you have to embrace anything else they've ever done or said. And I understand that. And but it's hard not to. And so we come here among ourselves to do this rather than do this in the full public square, though I guess anybody could be listening to this show. Anybody. Anybody could be listening. You're listening, so why not? You see what I mean? All right, I'm already making a mess of this, but I'm reading him say Cohen's guilty plea changes that, and I get what he's trying to say. To me, there's a subtext of, I only believe Republicans are guilty when Republicans themselves admit that they're guilty. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess that's not really what I'm sure he would disagree with that. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that now that he's guilty and, or it's all out in the open, and I suppose had they convicted him on someone else's evidence, I'd have believed it too. But I don't know whether I don't know whether I believe that about Bret Stephens. I don't know him personally, but I have difficulty believing, that he would come around to that. And perhaps it is that it was a guilty plea. Like, now there can be no doubt. Whereas, had he gone to trial and been convicted, all the while insisting either that he didn't do it or that if he did do it, it shouldn't be illegal because some kind of legal reasoning, or just yelling. And there would be room there for Bret Stephens to say, I know he's been convicted by a jury of his peers, but I don't know. I have my doubts. I think they got the case wrong. I think it should be overturned on appeal, whatever. Or I just think we're conceiving of this crime in the wrong way, and it's really politics. Republicans are constantly saying you're criminalizing politics every time we indict one of them, or think about it. Anyway, they're right. They're very quick on the trigger with that you're criminalizing politics thing. But that's why this strikes me as, Bret Stephens saying, well, I'm willing to accept that Republicans did something wrong once I hear it from Republicans. When Democrats tell me that this thing that Republicans did was wrong, I think that's partisan. When Republicans tell me that the thing they did was wrong, I have to accept that objective fact, and that's troubling. I don't like it that way, and I'm sure he would argue that that's not what he means, but I am here to argue that that is what he means, and you shouldn't listen to him when he says the opposite. Anyway, here's Greg. Hi, Greg. Are you under indictment?
No, but I resent the way that you're politicizing criminals.
Yes. Well, I like to I like to politicize crime and bring it into the same fold. And I've noted before there are many similarities between Donald Trump and me, and we work in the same ways in many instances. And
well, I've noted there's many relations and similarities between Donald Trump and Fredo Corleone.
That is true. And that's why I don't fish.
Mm. So you got to be careful who you get in the boat with.
Right.
So what happened yesterday?
I am unsure. I don't think anybody is in jail yet.
No, Donald Trump's upset, though, because he tweeted this morning, if anybody's looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen.
Oh.
To which I would say, well, if anybody's looking for a good president, I would strongly suggest you don't look for Donald Trump.
Well, yeah. I was wondering. I thought people were saying he was quiet this morning. Okay, so that's it. He tweeted that. He really said that? What a weird thing.
Yeah. And well, the whole day was kind of weird. So a lot of big things happened.
So. All right, then. Do you think
hear about 'em?
people? I don't. Did others? What do you guys? Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like we can do like a children's show. Hey, what? I can't hear you. Do you want to hear about the indictments? Yeah.
Right. Well,
okay.
let's talk about that. So,
yeah.
I mean, there's some good headlines from around the country. Cohen pleads guilty, implicating president is the headline in the New York Times, the so-called paper of record.
Yes. Bret Stephens works there.
He does. Interestingly, the New York Times is going to be changing its front page.
Oh?
What it does, it's going to take a slightly different look, but one of the things that's going to happen is they're going to leave off a lot of the bylines.
Leave off the
So you
bylines.
won't know it's a Patrick Healy or Maggie Haberman piece. You just have to click on it to find out.
That's sort of interesting. Oh, is that only in the...
Yeah, because I'd like to know if it's a Patrick Healy piece so I could skip it and not read it.
Well, right. I mean, I see they're trying to fool you. That's okay. Is that just the online version? Are they printing?
Just
you still get your name
the
printed,
online
right?
version for sure.
Okay. Well, a good trick, everybody.
The Washington Post. Cohen pleads guilty, says he coordinated with Trump to pay off women and influence the election.
Yes, he did do that.
Right. Cohen's claim about Trump may spark calls for impeachment, but it's unlikely to lead to charges. I like the tweeter who pointed out this morning, what you need to do is you have to run on accountability, not necessarily impeachment.
I see. Okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah.
Wink, wink. We got to run on winking.
Yeah, winking is good. But here's how I put it today in the Pundit Roundup. As of yesterday, Donald Trump is the first president to essentially be an unindicted co-conspirator since Richard Nixon. Michael Cohen says Trump, committed a crime.
He did.
Supporting material still to be outlined, by the way, and that will be important.
Cool. It's another
By
show.
paying off women to silence them. The crime impacted the election. Lanny Davis, Cohen's lawyer, says Cohen can implicate Trump with the email computer hacks to John Podesta and the DNC, or the DNC. He's not clear on that yet. But Lanny Davis suggests that Trump knew about it in advance.
Why did he do that?
And that sets Trump up for impeachment. Oh, and some stuff happened with Paul Manafort, too.
Right.
And all of that, even before Mueller gets to the Russia part of this. And Manafort has another trial coming up. So yesterday was a pretty big day. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on the internet. I don't play one on the radio. If Armando's available to talk about some of the legal aspects of this, that'd be great. What happened in the Manafort trial is that Manafort was guilty on 8 counts.
Yes.
And 10 they couldn't decide on. And at the moment that the verdict was announced, it felt like, 8 out of 10, or 8 out of 18 with 10 not being clear, but quickly that faded. And it was like he's a felon. And he was convicted on 8 counts, and that's fine. And of those 8 counts, most of them were for tax evasion, every tax evasion charge he was guilty of.
Yeah.
But he was also guilty of at least one of the bank fraud and one of the I didn't tell them that I had foreign bank accounts stuff. Those were more complicated. My gut feeling was that the judge's thumb on the scale, not allowing the prosecutors to clearly present those cases, probably had something to do with that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because in every area that the federal government said that Manafort was guilty, Manafort was guilty.
Yeah, I was wondering whether somebody was going to try and say, well, he was cleared on the majority, and he wasn't cleared.
Well, Fox News did, but that didn't work. I mean, because he's a felon.
Yeah, I mean,
has to go to jail.
It's the kind of thing you can only say from inside.
There's no way to play that other than he's a felon and he has to go to jail, and he was guilty.
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. So a minority of the charges brought, but I see you're in an orange jumpsuit. What's up with that?
Yeah, I mean, somebody pointed out there was a terrorism case. I think that goes back to the attempt to blow up the 2 towers in New York the first time, and somebody had like 300 counts against them and was convicted on 1, and they were in jail.
Well, it reminds me of all the, there's a lot of old jokes that go, and it's not mostly about jail, but like graduating last in your class or your medical school, right? Still doctor.
Yeah. What do they call you, doctor? Right. I mean, so the thing is he's guilty, and this was not necessarily the Russia stuff. That trial, in terms of him being a unregistered foreign agent, comes next, and that's in D.C. Cool. Different judge, different venue. Won't be a rocket docket. But Manafort has already been found guilty. He's already a felon. And if he's convicted in the next one, then the fact that he's a felon, I think, is going to be part of the sentencing for the next set of things that he does. So he's in big trouble.
It's his second strike.
Yeah. Even though the first strike was only like a week ago.
Yeah, well,
It still counts as a second strike.
If you swing at every pitch, it's going to go quick.
So the point is there's a lot of pressure on him. And he's yet another different figure associated with Trump that's guilty. Whether it's Mike Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, whose guilt is now not a question of debate. He's guilty in a court of law, judged by his peers.
Dun, dun.
And then you have a much bigger situation now. The Manafort thing may be bigger later at the other trial, but as far as right now, what's making Trump sweat is Michael Cohen, because Michael Cohen, as they like to say, has the receipts.
Yes.
I mean, to the point where he's actually pushed Omarosa off the news.
Yeah, that's true.
Cohen's receipts are more important than Omarosa's receipts.
Yeah, she hasn't been around doing that.
I saw her in Hardball yesterday. She was invited on to talk, but she was just part of a panel because there was so much else going on.
She's holding.
She claims
Yeah.
that Trump knew all about this stuff, everything.
Right. Well, I think she may be right.
The proof that the fact that she's an unreliable person saying this, and of course Cohen, as Donald Trump correctly points out, is not a very good lawyer, is an unreliable person. It still comes down to the receipts. Now, there's over 1 million things, whether they're files, whether they're copies, PDFs, whatever, tapes that were taken from Michael Cohen. And Lanny Davis claims that, there's stuff that can back up these claims. And so if the receipts are really there, Trump is in big, big trouble. And that's only beginning to seep into the consciousness of the elected Republicans today. I mean, everybody knew that this was an issue. They were trying to avoid it. I mean, the best way to deal with stuff sometimes is to pay attention to everything else but that and pretend it doesn't happen. Paul Ryan's very good at that.
Yes.
But with the combination, within an hour of two guilty people who are intimately associated with Trump, plus the promise of receipts with more to come, that's why it's plastered all over the news. And that's important because lots of people hate politics and don't pay attention to the news. But this stuff is so ubiquitous, for the next 24, 48 hours, you're not going to be able to not pay attention. It's just going to be everywhere. You walk into the airport, it's on CNN, it's on Fox, it's on this, it's on that. Banner headlines across today's front pages. This is a tweet by Steve Riley that was since deleted, but I have the original tweet. New York Times, pleading guilty, Cohen implicates Trump. USA Today, legal spotlight turns on Trump. Wall Street Journal, former Trump advisors guilty. Washington Post, convictions tighten squeeze on Trump. They could have added Fox News, illegal kill somebody in Heartland State. Because that's what they're concentrating on.
Right. Well, that's the most horrific thing ever.
Yeah, it's terrible. But, I don't think they spent a whole lot of time on this. I think Hannity spent some time on this, but I don't pay attention to Hannity, so I don't know. But the fact that this is so ubiquitous and it's going to be discussed at such great length matters, like for people like Bret Stephens that you were talking about.
Yes. Because
now you have that amplification. Even Bret Stephens is. Let's talk about Bret Stephens.
Right.
Even he's saying that, And then to me, one of the more interesting things, of course, is going to be watching the professional Trump apologists. I also wrote this morning is there's going to be people, professional Trump defenders, who are going to have their credibility and careers destroyed. Some will go down with the ship. The others will scuttle like rats. Watch and remember. And so I noted Bret Stephens. But you have people like Hugh Hewitt who say, well, if there's no collusion, then there's no impeachment.
Yes, right.
And so the new thing is, okay, he may be guilty of all this stuff.
Yeah.
He might have murdered your mother and strangled your puppies, but that's got nothing to do with Russia. Therefore, no harm, no foul.
Yes, the literalists who just got finished telling us that Nazis were socialists now say, well, you haven't convicted him of collusion, which really wasn't, I don't know who even
It's not a crime, so
started
you
that
can't
one.
convict somebody of collusion, so it's a nice setup there.
Yeah, so there you have it. It's all done.
You haven't convicted me of drinking water, therefore your claims about my doing stuff
I am not guilty.
don't hold water because you are no longer qualified to talk about water.
Yes, I have anticipated that argument, by the way, especially as they are now flocking to the airwaves to say, well, as you know, a sitting president cannot be indicted. And I think even Trump is reminding everybody, a sitting president cannot be indicted. And I intend to use their logic to indict the president the moment he stands up. And I don't see how they're going to be able to fight that.
If, defensive works are in circles, this is like the last circle.
Yeah, well,
the last defense
I guess so.
is, okay, well, I did it, but you can't do anything about it.
Yes, and there is that. And as Armando reminds us...
This didn't happen, and then it was, I didn't do it, and then it was, okay, even if I did it, it wasn't a crime, and then it's, well, too bad, you can't do anything about it.
I guess so. I always wondered whether there would be an intermediate step where they would say, well, I did do it, and it's a good thing. But they just went right to, well, you can't do anything to me, you can't arrest me for it, and I could pardon myself anyway. So I guess they skipped that step. Armando also reminds us that Alan Dershowitz, obviously among the ranks of apologists, and insisting everybody does this stuff.
Yeah, which of course is wrong. The thing, and
I don't mind arresting some
Jeff
more.
Smith, who went to jail for a St. Louis
he did. Who was that?
Implication of something like that. That was his defense that he used, then failed, and he went to jail.
Right. Okay.
So he tweeted this morning saying, nice try, but that doesn't always work.
But he does get out.
Well, so I said to him, it's funny because there's a lot of things about this whole situation that Trump finds himself in terms of Mueller investigation, conspiracy, money laundering, obstructive justice.
How did I
understand a lot about a lot of this. The thing I don't understand that somebody has to explain to me is Alan Dershowitz.
Yeah.
I don't understand that at all.
I don't know. I guess he just likes being on TV, and, he writes books. People who write books, for whatever reason, and this is one of the great ironies of life, I think, literary life anyway, you sell more books, you're a more successful author, which they still attach a great deal of intellectual heft to being an author. The more you're on television, the better your books sell, and the more books you get to write. Well, that's what Omarosa says. It's true. Pitching books is, I think, about 60% of television news time is spent pitching people's books, and they love having authors on as experts. They haven't written a book, you're second in line.
But it's just so weird. The way I put it together is the reason why Dershowitz wound up in Trump's corner here has nothing to do with the fact that he wrote a book, but Trump, of course, is the ultimate doesn't have shame, totally shameless kind of person. You cannot shame Trump into doing anything. He doesn't have that gene, and I think Dershowitz sort of shares that characteristic. Yeah, and so it isn't just that he wrote a book. It's that he'll say anything, and he doesn't really care that it's stupid.
Right. Well, he's of the any publicity is good publicity school, generally.
But you have to feel that in your bones to be able to go on TV and pull that off convincingly. And most of us cannot do that.
Yeah. And I don't get the sense that Dershowitz is not in the same league as Trump. I guess nobody really is.
Nobody really is. He's the superstar of that, but he's got the shameless gene to a certain extent. He can go in there and say stuff, and it doesn't matter
and he puts
it's true or not true that he sounds like a jerk.
Yeah, he passes it off as zealous representation of a position. I'm arguing, or if he looks like an idiot, then he says, "Well, I'm being a devil's advocate." So that's called being an idiot.
Exactly. It's called chutzpah, is what it's called.
Oh yeah. Right. Well, there is that word for it as well. I don't know if he's still in.
The other Yiddish word that people should get familiar with is ganef. That means thief.
That's true. We should really just do the whole show that way, but I can't. But we can pull out the Yiddish dictionary.
So I'm just pointing out these are things that you should know.
Okay. I'm ready to. All right. Well, we'll collect a few other things.
All right.
Armando
so here's another collecting in the few minutes we have before the break. Jeffrey Toobin, who's been a frequent critic of the whole look at the Mueller investigation, says Cohen committed crimes in coordination with and at the direction of Donald Trump. Thus, President appears to be co-conspirator and or aider and abettor of a federal crime.
Yes, sir.
This, to me, would be kind of important.
Well, some people say.
GOP take note. John Harwood points out that Lenny Davis on Rachel Maddow suggests strongly that his client Michael Cohen has information from Mueller on Trump campaign collusion with Russia and Trump's knowledge of plans for Russian hacking before the hacking occurred. Yes. And that's what Omarosa said last night on Matthews, again, without proof.
Yes.
But if there are receipts, again, that'll be quite interesting.
Yeah, well, he says he's got them, and I don't know. There was an awful lot of garbage taken out of his apartment. One of them has got to be a receipt.
You'd think. Okay, White House reporter for Politico, Christopher Cadillago, tweets, the sheer force of the two stories breaking within minutes of each other, that is the Manafort and the Cohen pieces, our unavoidable impression that the walls are closing in on a president facing serious accusations of wrongdoing, leaving some to worry what Donald Trump will do next.
Yes, that's
and
true.
What they mean by that is which war is he going to start?
Right. I also don't think the walls are closing. I believe he's expanding towards the walls.
That could be. That's kind of a scary thought, though, because he might explode.
Yes, well, it's just a little
I saw that in
relativity
Big Trouble in Little China. You know, one of the villains just got so mad he exploded.
Oh, okay. I thought you said
that was like
Big
really
Trump
bad.
in Little China. I didn't know that was a film.
It's a movie.
Yeah, Big Trouble in... yes, that one. Big Trump in Little China, I've never heard of.
Big Trouble in Little China.
Okay.
Anyway, Michael Scheer. If there's any doubt as to whether Michael Cohen was going to be willing to implicate real Donald Trump in criminal activity, these statements he gave in open court ends it.
Yes.
What statement? The defendant. Thank you, sir, he said to the judge. As to count number 7, on or about the summer of, at the direction of, a candidate of office, I and the CEO of a media company did X, Y, and Z. So he's talking about the payments, and Cohen says Trump directed them.
Yeah, that's pretty good, and I like the sneaky language. A federal candidate for office, because I've worked for so many of them. All right, we'll take our 2-minute break and contemplate the rest of the world and whether or not we want Armando to have anything to say about it after this.
We always do.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I almost forgot to come back. I'm catching up on all of the various players in the dramas this morning. Just happened to see a tweet come by from Andrew Roth of The Guardian saying, I guess they're pursuing yet another angle on the Manafort case and looking to get comment from Konstantin Kilimnik, who worked closely with him, and not only most of the cases that were brought up during his prosecution, but apparently some that were not. And he's avoiding commenting to the press, although he is safely ensconced in Moscow. So I don't think.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if he was from the Russian part of New York. Is he from like Brooklyn, the boardwalk?
Yeah, the Moscow part.
Brighton Beach.
No, apparently the no extradition treaty part.
Mm.
So, I assume he'll be speaking up at some point soon. All right. What else? Who else's arrest do you want to cover?
Who else arrest? Well, there's other stuff here, but yes. I want to finish up with this interesting back and forth with Amy Walter and Hugh Hewitt.
Oh, okay.
Hugh Hewitt tweets, Cohen has already done his worst, and it's pretty bad. That's not true. It's not his worst. To real Donald Trump setting up an impeachment count. Now Manafort starts to think, what do I have to trade? Neither have connected POTUS to Russian collusion or conspiracy yet, but it's early. No collusion equals no impeachment. What? And Amy Walter says, a serious question, Hugh. Are you saying the only way Trump can be impeached is if it relates to Russia collusion? Nothing else qualifies as an impeachable offense? When did the measure of high crimes misdemeanors mean it has to relate to only one topic? Okay. Which I thought was an excellent question, and that gets to the heart of how the Republicans are attempting to answer this. Mm-hmm. And I suggested that Hugh Hewitt is paid to think this way, and he's not anything close to a fair analyst. And Jennifer Rubin chimed in and said, no, he's not a serious person.
Well, he isn't. He's never been.
But be that as it may,
yes.
It's, I think, the correct question to be asking Trump supporters, because you can't get away with the idea that, oh, well, just because he broke campaign finance law, attempted to influence the election, and basically cheated, it doesn't count.
Okay. Because
it didn't mention Russia. That's ridiculous.
I would ridicule it. I'm ready to do so.
Mm. So anyway, there's that. What other things do we have? We have the Duncan Hunter thing we talked about a little bit. It's too late to get his name off the ballot, by the way. So Duncan Hunter is, Secretary of State says, too late. So unless you die in the next 10 days, you're on the ballot.
Well, if he were convicted with respect to something he had done in Russia, that could be a possibility.
But wait, there's more.
All right.
Breaking in Playbook this morning, Republicans preparing to forcibly remove Duncan Hunter from his House committees because he's refusing to take a leave.
Oh, well, okay.
Be the top House business after Labor Day. Not what GOP needs at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, and after Labor Day, I understand that is when people pay attention.
Yeah. And then there's the cabinet. Trump advisor Larry Kudlow hosted a publisher of a white nationalist at his home. Mm-hmm. Peter Brimelow promoted white nationalism. Yeah, I guess he runs the VDare site. I mean, there's no way you could not know he's a white nationalist.
Right.
So there's that.
Okay.
And then Vanity Fair pointing out that they're squeezing Don Jr. right now as the Mueller siege tightens, Trump Twitter rage crests.
That's so flowery. I don't think I even understood the line. I'll have to take a look at it in print so I can.
Yeah, it's in the pundit roundup, but okay. I'll send it over to you so you can take a look at it in print because
I was like, what?
Maybe you need William Shatner reading it, to make it
that could be.
Sound better.
Maybe.
But the important point of that story, Trump's frustration with Sessions is even Jeff Sessions. And by the way, the first person to endorse Trump from Congress,
yes,
Chris Collins,
right,
indicted.
Yeah.
The second person, Duncan Hunter,
really
indicted. The third person, Jeff Sessions.
Well, he's the one doing all the indicting.
Yeah, well, he's recused, so he can't be doing the indicting.
Oh, right. Well, okay.
But Trump's frustration with Sessions has even caused him to turn on Giuliani. Over the weekend, Trump blamed Giuliani for the entire Russia probe. According to a person to whom the conversation was described, Trump loudly said to his lawyer, "It's your fault. I offered you Attorney General, and you insisted on Secretary of State."
But he didn't get that either.
None of this would have been happening.
I don't even understand. Okay. I mean, he's not blaming him for all of this, like, for the
Trump's
part
fault.
when he was.
Fault.
Well, yes. But I thought.
Because Trump sees the White House counsel, John Dean's old office.
Right.
I would point out.
Yes.
Don McGahn now occupies it. And he sees Jeff Sessions, head of the Justice Department, as being his personal lawyers.
Yes.
He doesn't understand that they have institutional responsibilities that are separate from him. He cannot grasp this because that's not how he thinks.
Right.
Everything is him.
Well,
that's what happens when you're a professional narcissist.
Yes, and I mean it's a common mistake in many ways. Very often, corporate attorneys will have to remind the CEOs, "I'm not your personal."
I represent the organization,
attorney,
not you personally. You need your own personal lawyer if you're in trouble.
Right. Even in his so-called business career, because he only worked for a family business, a family-owned business. Right. That distinction never really made any sense to him there either.
I'm not a lawyer, but let's just say for the sake of argument, okay, it's going to be gruesome, but for the sake of argument, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company winds up strangling his wife.
Okay. Let's say that.
The corporate lawyer is not in a position to defend this guy, even though he works for that company.
Right.
Because it's not a company issue. It's a personal issue. You need your own personal defense lawyer for that.
Yes. Unless she was
he
strangled her because she was involved.
I'm not a lawyer, but didn't I get that right?
He's a pharmaceutical company CEO, and she was involved in a clinical
But he
drug
poisoned
trial.
her, right?
And was,
So why can't and he
Well, he
poisoned her
strangled
using
her.
company drugs? So why can't the company defend him?
Yes, there's that. Or she was going to be part of a study that disproved the efficacy
something,
of our drug,
but
so I killed her.
the whole idea is
For
that
the
they're the same.
shareholders.
No, they're not the same. You have to separate your own personal life in minor
Right.
peccadillos like murdering people from, the corporate life. So you
You are
can't expect the
supposed to.
corporate people to defend you on that.
Right, and the CEOs come back and say, I don't understand. I take the corporate jet on vacation all the time. You don't make me separate it then.
Besides, it would make you guys look bad. It's in your interest to defend me.
Yeah. So, all right.
But it
good.
still doesn't work that way. So McGahn is not Trump's personal lawyer.
No.
And the attorney general is not Trump's personal lawyer. He doesn't get it, and so he's mad at Rudy for not taking, because Rudy would have been his personal lawyer, and that would have been a terrible disaster had that happened. So
Yeah.
I suppose we can be thankful we dodged that bullet.
I guess so. I thought, though, that he was blaming him. This is the astounding part, is he's not blaming him for making it and saying, this is all your fault because of what you have done for me from the outside
Since.
as my lawyer. Yeah, when I said you should
Yeah.
represent me on television. I thought he meant that was what made this all his fault, because
No,
it is.
he's very happy about what Rudy's doing. He's
That's
like
astounding.
confusing everybody, and nobody knows what Rudy's talking about, and truth isn't truth, and he's all in with that kind of stuff.
I guess so, which...
He's just mad that he's in this situation in the first place because he can't possibly blame himself. That's not ever a possibility.
Well, and I blame Obama. He's
No, you
around.
blame Hillary. That's why he goes
Right.
to a West Virginia rally last night and says, lock her up.
Yes. I noticed that some people sent footage of video of the chanting, but so you can't tell. I don't know whether it's they can't get their act together and chant at the same time. I think they were chanting two different things. There was Drain the Swamp, which is equally stupid, and Lock Her Up. And it just
Drain Her
sounded
Up.
like, it just was like a loud mess. And well, that's a little bit like West Virginia, really.
Well, I like Swamp the Drain. I think that's really exactly what's happening.
That's basically. It's amazing that he continues to have these rallies in the middle of all this. I guess that's the
Well, he
only
needs
good
it.
news
He
in
needs
his
it for
life.
psychological, although people, Trump watchers were pointing out he wasn't really high energy last night.
Yes, they did say that there were no joking around on Air Force One on the way back.
No, I think he's kind of upset about how things are going.
I
So
guess
in non-impeachment and corruption news,
Yes.
Matthew Iglesias points out,
Arrest that guy.
I'd like to see an apology from some of the people who wrote columns demanding liberals give Trump credit for his obviously fake diplomatic breakthrough with North Korea.
Yeah, well,
Because
you wait.
North Korea says IAEA, the watchdog, says it sees no indication North Korea skipped or stopped nuclear activities since Trump claimed a deal. There is no deal. People who pointed that out were criticized, but the fact of the matter is the whole thing was a joke, and we said that from the get-go, and it was, and it is.
Yeah. Well, we're way behind on that stuff.
Meanwhile, individual congressional polls keep coming back with weird results. Kansas 3rd District, a Democratic poll shows Sharice Davids in a close race between Davids and GOP Representative Kevin Yoder. That is to say, the Republican incumbent is trailing.
Okay. Yoder.
Right? It's an internal poll. We all understand that internal polls are suspect. But the
Right.
point is, it shouldn't be competitive.
No.
Not that the Democrat is ahead. There's another poll in a different district showing the same thing. But these things shouldn't be competitive.
Not for Yoder. He's very popular in Dagobah. I never noticed that before for some reason. All right. Well, the tight races in places that you didn't expect. That's good. It's indicative of probably a red wave or something like that. Maybe the opposite.
Report in Politico, Representative Steve Chabot. How do you pronounce his name? Chabot.
I think people go with Chabot for a while, but I don't know anymore.
Not
Who
Robo.
cares? Robo. Yeah, Che your boat.
So he's in a rough
singing.
race, and this used to be a once safe seat. This is Georgia 7. Georgia 7 has a R+9 partisan voter index. That is to say, it votes 9 points more Republican than the country as a whole. And in suburban Georgia 7, Democrat Carolyn Bordeaux leads incumbent GOP Representative Rob Woodall by 46-44. Again, same thing as with the Cincinnati poll. It's an internal poll. You can't necessarily take it for face value, but the point is, in an R+9 district, this shouldn't be close. It is.
Yeah.
So all of that has a lot of implications for November. There really is a blue wave, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Excellent.
You can see it if you look and step back at the big picture. You can look at it in the individual districts. There's more districts than ever in play, and this stuff is going on. Kelly Ward in Scottsdale, Arizona, 1 week out for her primary against Martha McSally and, of course, Joe Arpaio. Kelly Ward in Scottsdale, 1 week out. When I say Arizona has a big choice, we do. We have to decide, are we going to elect another senator in the mold of Jeff Flake and John McCain? No. I know we're going to elect an America First champion. Now, she is accepting a bus tour with Mike Cernovich.
Yes.
And Stuart Stevens, a Republican analyst and advisor, says a total moral collapse, nicely summarized, rejecting an American hero, John McCain, and campaigning with a nut like Cernovich. Well done.
Yeah, that's been a been a big topic the last couple of days. Apparently, she contends that she didn't really even give a good excuse. They asked her about that. Why would you campaign?
She wants to represent everybody. You know, it's the usual mealy mouth stuff. But the point is, you're rejecting McCain while you're doing this in Arizona. Yes.
So clearly, there's something else going on. I think her other line was, well, I have to get the press interested, so I'm traveling with this person who makes the press interested. Right. Like, again, you can't get the press interested with John McCain or anything like that. That's good news for John McCain.
Everything is good news for John McCain. And then finally, I have this piece from Politico. This morning, they did a morning consult poll. Trump trails several Democratic prospects in 2020. The president's approval rating is 42, down a tick from 43. And as I pointed out, looking at 2020 polls with name recognition for people like Bernie and Joe Biden is useless, except that it's a narrative setter. And I like the narrative. If you're going to trail a generic Democrat or you're going to trail specific Democrats that you can name, then that puts a damper on but despite it all, he'll be reelected in 2020 garbage. I'm not even sure he's going to be in office in 2019 the way things are going.
Oh, well, hey, I hope not. That would be great.
I mean, all of these, predictions about what's going to happen, whether it's November, whether it's after, all are predicated on the fact that nothing changes, that no new information happens. Look at yesterday. Look at 4 o'clock yesterday in terms of how quickly things can change. The idea that we're frozen in time and nothing will happen is a crazy concept. I can't point to you and say this is the thing that will change things. But change is inevitable. It's going to happen. And everybody who says, well, nothing ever changes, they're always going to miss when it does.
Yes, but they will always be there saying that. And so that's
they will, cool. And that's why you have to ignore them. Oh. They'll be right until they're wrong, and then, I didn't see this coming.
Well, that's punditry for you.
Yep.
Okay.
And with that, that's the end of my punditry. Hopefully Armando has time to come on and talk about the legal aspects of a very, very busy legal day yesterday. But for now, this is Wednesday. This is Greg Dworkin speaking to my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. A lot happened yesterday. I think it feels a whole lot like 1974-ish, with Nixon. I think that, these are big things that happen, and it's going to take a while to look in the looking back, just how big yesterday was, because I think it's the beginning of the end. How long the end takes, I don't know. It can take a long time. But things changed yesterday. Look at Brett Stevens. So with that, I'll see you tomorrow.
The mirror. Yeah, okay, very good. Thanks, Greg. Maybe we can bring back 1974. I'm sure that the 1974 look could come back as a hipster thing any moment.
Yeah.
Big mustache,
maybe some it's all about the music.
Pants, something, I don't know. Okay, we'll be working on it. Thanks, Greg. Take care. We'll see you again, I guess tomorrow, which is, by the way, the first day of school for kids here in our county. So the kids will be on their way out the door before and now, really, with our new schedule, just literally minutes before we go on air. So that can only make things worse. Let's see. I also have to add, for the record, by the way, Steve Chabo. I think in stiff competition with Donald Trump for most absurd comb-over engineering in world history, I think. I mean, he's just got one of the most ridiculous comb-overs ever, and has for many, many years, so of course it's only gotten worse. But you should just know that. I think there are a couple of... is this a picture of him, too? I can't tell, because it's a picture from behind. It's purposefully taken from behind, though, in order to illustrate just how ridiculous his comb-over is. If you go to Google Images and search Steve Chabo comb-over, you'll see one of the more absurd examples right up there at the top of the list. And let me go over just to the, I guess it leads me to a blog called Honolulu Notes. Another congressman steps on the Constitution. It's an entry from when? I don't know. It's just dated August 24th, and that hasn't happened yet, so I assume it's, well, that August 24th did happen. Ours here in 2018 hasn't happened. So I don't know how many years in the past it is. I don't know what the story is. I just know that they do take a moment out of the story to say Representative Chabo has an interesting comb over. It says, how do we know that? We found this picture of the back of his head, and you should see this thing. He is basically covering the entirety of the back and top of his head from the lower, what is this? The lower left, like, corner of the back of his head, right? Like, behind his ear at the back of his head. And he combs it up all the way, like, sweeps it to the right and then up and over his head. It's one of the more absurd things you've ever seen. It must be an astounding thing to, well, for a number of reasons, it would probably be an astounding thing to see him get out of the shower. But we could just say getting even out of a swimming pool, which I doubt he does very often for this particular reason. Is just, he must, I guess he looks like a comic book guy, maybe from The Simpsons, so with a little less up top. He must just have these flowing these flowing locks from the back of his head, and that's it. And I've never really seen the male pattern baldness go all the way back over the top of the head quite like that, because people get embarrassed at some point. And it's neither here nor there, and we shouldn't be making fun of the man's appearance, but I don't know. That's the way he chooses to represent himself in public, and there's no way I can help it. All right. Oh, this is not the time, really, Gmail, to make me go through, the new look of Gmail. Congratulations, okay? You've done it. But you should never roll these things out. Do this on a weekend or something. Really. Google. They think they're unaccountable. I tell you. All right. Armando, audience of one, if you'd like to make use of our airwaves, by all means, do join us and let's discuss some of the legal implications of what's going on. In the meantime, we can fill in some of the blanks, read some of the articles, some of the more egregious things that came to light. The Duncan Hunter stuff is, like, disgusting as it happens. So we'll just fill in some of the blanks with that. Let's see. Although maybe, depending on how things are working over in the Armando, what would we call it? In the Armando estate. I might have to type him a note to let him know. There we go. He's listening live, so we'll just bring him in here. Well, could play the music for a little while and bop back and forth on that. Hey, hi Armando, how you doing?
Hey David, how are you?
I am unindicted at the moment. How are you? So we're all doing well here.
As far as I know, unless there's a sealed indictment, I can join you in that claim.
Right, and if it's sealed, I just don't want to know about it. Technically, it's still correct. As far as you know, I'm not indicted. So other people are, and we have the guilty plea. Which of the two cases intrigues you most, or do you want to make obviously there are connections to be made between the two, or maybe you want to talk about Duncan Hunter stealing Hawaiian shorts from
that's
pro
quite
shops.
A story, and you could have had 2 hours of that. But
yeah,
obviously,
and I might.
In the scheme of things, I think that the fact that in a federal courthouse in Manhattan,
yes,
the President of the United States was accused in a allocution that was accepted by the court and supported by the Department of Justice. The President of the United States was basically stated to have committed the felony of conspiracy to violate campaign finance laws.
Yes.
Is the story of the day, the week, the year. This is not new for your show. You and I explored this fact when the Stormy Daniels payment first broke, whenever that was. I don't recall the day. It was either early this year or late last year, January, I believe. And from day one, you and I discussed the criminal liability the president faced if it could be shown that he was involved in what was clearly an illegal campaign contribution. We talked about the precedent of the John Edwards case and why Trump's position was much worse. The differences between the two is simply a question of evidence. John Edwards' situation, the payments were made maybe 18 months ahead of the election, at least a year ahead of the primary. There was no evidence that John Edwards directed the payment. No one would testify to that fact, not the people who made the payments to Riel Hunter, Bunny Mellon, and another person who could not testify because he was deceased. He was an older gentleman, and he passed away before there was a case. All those things didn't lead to the fact that there wasn't a case to be made against John Edwards. It just wasn't sufficient for a jury, which hung. He wasn't acquitted in the case. There was a hung jury, a mistrial, and then the prosecutor, using his discretion, did not retry the case. What's different here? And I've tried to make a point that I think is very important all day, but let's start with the basics first.
All right.
The timing of this payment. October. Less than a month till the election.
Yes.
A new piece of evidence was dropped in our laps yesterday, which is incredibly important on motivation. Yeah. That is, Cohen was approached on the Stormy Daniels front by her then attorney, apparently Keith Davidson, in September of 2016, and he had no interest in making any payments. What happened between September and October? The Access Hollywood tape dropped.
Yes, that's right.
The Access Hollywood tape dropped, and the situation with Stormy Daniels became, in the mind of Trump and Cohen, critical. It needed to be squashed.
That's true. They had lived with the knowledge of that the affair had happened, and the knowledge that people had actually, blabbed about it from 2006 to 2016. 10 years, they had no interest in paying her.
That's correct. Unlike Karen McDougal, which is another aspect, but I think the timeline for Daniels is clear, and I think the evidence on Daniels is also clear, because there's another key piece of evidence that's always hasn't always existed, but has existed since May 2, 2018. And that is, on the Sean Hannity show, Rudy Giuliani stated that the president, then candidate Donald Trump, knew about the payment, knew Michael Cohen would make these payments, directed Michael Cohen to make these payments, with every intention of, according to Rudy, reimbursing Cohen for those payments at a later date.
Yes.
The point being that what we've just described is, in fact, a campaign finance violation and a conspiracy to violate the campaign finance laws, which is a felony.
Okay.
So
yes.
Michael Cohen confirmed that that's what happened in his allocution yesterday when pleading guilty. He directly implicated the president as a person who directed and authorized him to act in the way he did. Rudy Giuliani on May 2nd, 2018, Rudy Giuliani is the president's lawyer. We're presuming that his statements on the Sean Hannity show were not only authorized by Trump, but the source of the information was Donald Trump.
Yes.
Just so you know, that makes Rudy Giuliani a witness in any case involving this, if there's one to be made against the president. So I think that the facts are no longer in dispute on this. Both sides, Cohen and Trump, agree the president directed and authorized this activity. The Southern District of New York, given all these facts, determined that that was a felony. Michael Cohen's attorney agreed to plead guilty to that felony. Mm-hmm. He allocated before the judge under oath in his plea statement. The judge accepted the plea, meaning he thought that constituted a felony. Mm-hmm. So the Department of Justice, Southern District of New York, and the judiciary of the United States, in the form of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, all agree that Donald Trump committed a felony.
Yes, plus Brett Stevens. just to lend him some additional majesty.
Let's be clear. That is where we are. Donald Trump, in his responding tweets this morning, and you've seen them. Pardon me?
There's more than one now, or?
Yeah, there's about 6 now.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Yeah, you may want to look at them. They're kind of interesting. Yeah. The one I would want you to focus on is his reaction to Cohen's campaign finance crime, in which he says, I'm not quoting because I don't have it in front of me, but I'll paraphrase, that Michael Cohen pled guilty to things that weren't a crime.
Those wacky judges.
Well, let me defend Trump here in this sense. That's the argument he has to make.
Okay.
We're on a break. I'll come back and tell you why I think that's the only argument
all right.
he has left.
Well, yes, these things never go quickly. So, all right, well, we'll tease you over the 1 minute break. It's just a short one, so we can wind up good and make a real delivery on the other side. I didn't realize he was up and tweeting again, so we'll take a look and find out what he has to say. And wow, okay, we'll just have to leave it there. Be back in 1 minute. I'll go take a peek. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I don't believe anyone else was indicted during the break, but I am catching up on Donald Trump's tweeting this morning. I did hear about the one from an hour ago. Greg brought up, if anyone's looking for a good lawyer, I would strongly suggest that you don't retain the services of Michael Cohen, which is an amazing thing, really, just to see out there.
Obviously it is, but I still think that the more questionable choice of lawyer that Trump has made is Rudolph Giuliani.
Yes.
Rudolph Giuliani has sunk Trump.
Yeah, and so much so that, I remember the first couple of weeks of his being on TV where people were saying, is he trolling Trump? Does Trump know what's happening right now on television? What his lawyer is saying. Okay.
Yeah, no, the May 2nd, 2018 interview with Sean Hannity was a stunner at the time.
Yes, look at the dates.
But we did not have the piece together that we got yesterday, which is that what Rudolph Giuliani said happened, mm-hmm. The Justice Department believes is a crime.
Yes.
Such to the fact that they accepted a guilty plea from Michael Cohen and the court accepted it.
Yeah, it's not automatic.
At the time, Rudy said, oh, yeah, this happened, but it's not a crime.
Right. And if that were true, the judge is not only free but obligated to say, you're pleading guilty to something that isn't a crime. I can't sentence you. This is not a thing. You can't just come in here and say, send me to jail because I said I've done something wrong. There has to be a real crime. So let's look it up. And you know how Rudy was having difficulty finding in the federal code where collusion is a crime. That's okay. That wasn't exactly what he was allocuting to. He was pleading to other things, which are a crime. And it may, there's also the possibility that Donald Trump may have little to no idea what crimes Cohen actually pled to yesterday. Just that whatever it isn't a crime. And it might be that I don't know what you're talking about. Of course it's a crime. Here's the actual statute. Let me read it to you. Oh, I thought it was about Russia. Well, it isn't. Not directly.
Well, that's the Hewitt, as you and Greg discussed, the Hewitt defense is if it's not about Russia, it's not a crime.
I don't know even where that. All right. Yeah, sure. Just say anything, I guess.
Well, and Alan Dershowitz is back from Martha's Vineyard, or he's talking from Martha's Vineyard.
Is he? I'm curious about where he is actually physically is.
So, I don't know, but
can't tell.
It seems to me that he should stay wherever he is. He's frankly, it's just embarrassing.
Well, let me just put it this way: don't leave town, sir. I'd like them to deliver it that way. All right. Well, he's not under arrest for anything.
Don't leave
he
town.
Could be. He says, "I don't want to see you surrender your passport."
Frankly, there is this question of why is he acting ridiculously, but I don't know why.
That's true.
Why he's acting?
This just raised an issue or two for me. I'll see if I can make a list of them. But first of all, where is Michael Cohen now? Having pled guilty, does he get to go home and report for prison later?
He does.
Okay.
He has not been sentenced yet.
And when that happens, will just because we've been involved with this particular item, does he surrender his passport?
He does indeed. He does indeed. And
all right.
One of the things
finally we get to look inside.
Would have been for him to admit that, but it really was not part of the case that he was lying about not being in Prague. That would be
terrific if we got a chance to look inside the passport. But it's a very famous cover. This passport, he tweeted it around as proof positive that he had never been in Prague. And how hilarious would that be to have him turn it in and have the FBI flip through and look for. At least I guess some indication of having entered the European Union.
I believe he went to Czechoslovakia. I mean, he went to Germany first, is the theory, and then drove to Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic.
In a van with Bill Murray.
The Czech Republic.
And Harold Ramis.
Afterwards.
Yes. And as you know, driving to Czechoslovakia is like going into Wisconsin. So it's easy to do.
I don't know if you know that, but you can drive from France to England through the Channel or the Netherlands. And
yes. By the way, are they close the Channel if they Brexit? Does that mean you can't use? I mean, they should close. France should close that.
Well, it's going to be a problem actually, and it's an interesting
major
Brexit issue that there will be huge lines in the tunnel, or people will have to be directed. And then if you've ever crossed Canada. The entry back to the United States from Canada is, awful at many points. But that'll be, the cliffs of Dover and where the Channel. I can't remember where the Channel comes out on. Calais, I guess, is the spot on the French side. So that's a new problem for them. But to get you back to where Cohen's going to be, he will be at his house. Presumably, he's they probably had to surrender his passport. I don't know that anybody's reported on that,
unless somebody seized it in the raid and they already have it.
They may very well have it, but I don't think he plans to leave now. He's made his bed, and he'll probably end up with a 4-year prison sentence, which probably ends up being 2 in jail, and then halfway house type stuff and all that stuff that happens.
He loves the bargaining, right? They said 4, but I talked them down to 2.
They had him on a lot of stuff. I mean, I believe that in fact 4 years is not a bad deal for him.
Yeah.
I think one of the things
he stole the presidency. That's 4 years, 2 inside. That's pretty good.
Yeah. They had him on this, bank fraud for like $20 million, and that itself carries a 30-year sentence. Just that one. Going under the guidelines, it probably reduces to 6 or 7, but it carried a maximum of 30. Plus, they had him on income tax, everything. He pled guilty to 8 counts.
Yes, big
and
number
if he comes out with 4, that's not a bad deal. The question that people were arguing about before, and I don't know if you were following it, the reporter goes, no cooperation agreement. It's just a straight plea deal. And we got a lot of conflicting stuff from different attorneys. Preet Bharara, who you figure would know, said he was surprised there wasn't a cooperation deal at the time. But then someone else said, well, sometimes they don't happen until after. And then there was someone who says, well, sometimes you don't even know about them. They're kept secret.
Yeah.
which, maybe that comes up in sentencing. It didn't have to come up yesterday. At any rate, it was a big mismatch, and I was frankly kind of floored by the imprecision of the different legal opinions on it. I am not a criminal lawyer, but I studied the particular law that interests me on this because tax evasion and stuff, I'm no expert at that on area of the law, but they assume it's cheating on your taxes is a felony and they can get you. Now, what's very interesting about the tax evasion parts of it
Yeah.
are that he was mischaracterizing some of the monies that he got from Trump. But in a way, he cheated himself on taxes, too, because he got reimbursed, though he got paid more. Oh, by the way, small aside that I just saw recently is in his financial disclosures, the Trump organization, Donald Trump, said that they paid Michael Cohen $250,000 in 2017 for things that happened in 2016. In essence, that's how they explained the Stormy Daniels payments, that they reimbursed them.
Oh, yes.
That's what Rudy was all about at the time. Well, it turns out, according to this indictment and now plea deal, in fact, they paid him $420,000.
Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, so okay, so more. That would be
Right.
more.
They
wouldn't
also, the Trump organization itself mischaracterized the payments as
that they were doing from the
for
beginning.
legal services rendered in 2017,
Well,
as opposed to
420,000.
reimbursement.
Okay, this is another problem.
One of the key things is they said that he committed fraud, and the Trump organization was a part of it because he kept saying he was getting paid for legal services when he was not rendering any legal services at all. This was just getting paid money for nothing. That's actually verbatim from the plea deal. So there's also implications of the Trump organization on this, as well as Donald Trump.
Yes.
And to go back to the campaign finance, there's two aspects of the campaign finance violations. One is what I just said, which was that the payments themselves on those amounts were improper, well exceeded the limitations on how much you could contribute, even as a loan, as you know, even if you reimburse them. But of course, Cohen wasn't reimbursed by the candidate. He was reimbursed by the Trump organization. Donald Trump himself did not reimburse him.
Yes, another one of his favorite tricks is to use some outside entity whose money he controls by virtue of his position in the company or foundation, as the case may be, to pay with other people's money. Although Trump organization money at least is closer to his money than the foundation was.
Now, the other interesting thing is that, of course, Cohen created that LLC to make the payments.
Yes.
And that in itself, using that vehicle to make a campaign contribution is in itself a violation.
That's true,
corporations can't make political donations to candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also a felony. There's one other wrinkle that I think will particularly interest you. You've heard all the stories about the David Pecker capture and kill story stuff.
Yes.
This is the McDougal part of it.
Yeah.
And they say that in September 2015, Cohen says he did this all at the direction of Donald Trump, had communications and reached an agreement with David Pecker of AMI, American Media Inc., or something like that. I forget what the I is exactly, but it's the National Enquirer guy. And he, to be clear, he bought the McDougal story for, I forget the amount of money, $150,000 or whatever it was. And this was done in coordination. This was also considered by the prosecutor in the court and pled guilty to by Cohen as a felony violation of the campaign finance laws because it funneled a corporate contribution to a campaign And,
Yep.
Obviously $150,000 is well above the $2,700 individual limit for donating to a campaign. So that also is a felony. And David Pecker, in my view, is also an unindicted co-conspirator, and I think he could be indicted. Why not?
I don't know. I can think of no reason.
So, I mean, we focused on Trump, of course. He's the president, but I believe David Pecker needs an attorney as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, is where we're at. In a normal world, the fact that a federal court has found that the President of the United States engaged in a felony conspiracy to violate the campaign finance laws would lead to the immediate opening of impeachment hearings.
Yes, one might think.
This is the question of a high crime or misdemeanor, and that you touched on in your discussions with Greg with regard to Hugh Hewitt's statement that if it's not Russian collusion, it's not impeachable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously that's wrong.
I don't even know. I can't even find a false interpretation of a kernel of truth for that to stand on. What do you mean?
Yeah, I don't know what he means, but it's Hugh Hewitt who is straight up hack. So what are you going to do? But let's think about it this way. Is every felony a high crime or misdemeanor we've always talked about? Or does there even need to be a felony or a crime to be one? You've heard these discussions. Impeachment is actually a political process.
Yep.
And what we're talking about are norms and what we talk about. All right, so you're saying, well, did you let's talk about the perjury trap thing. If Mueller, and remember Ken Starr called for an impeachment for what he called Bill Clinton's misleading grand jury testimony mostly, but also with regard to his deposition testimony in the Paula Jones case about Monica Lewinsky. And there was no question that everybody on the Republican side certainly thought that was an impeachable offense.
Yeah.
I personally didn't think it was an impeachable offense because lying under oath in a civil deposition simply isn't anything. It is basically what happens. By the way, Bill Clinton also didn't lie under oath. He finagled a ridiculous definition of what sex meant. And he could plausibly deny it, and there's really no way of proving it one way or the other. Because what Bill Clinton did admit to under grand jury testimony was not part of the definition of sex in his civil deposition. Either way, you could argue about what he did and whether you thought that was impeachable. I thought it wasn't. You might think it was. I'm not going to say you're absolutely crazy, but okay. Here is what Trump has been accused of. In the campaign of his election to the presidency, he committed a felony so that he could win the office.
Yes.
How can that not be an impeachable offense? It goes to the very essence of how he became president.
Yeah.
That is why Watergate in some ways is analogous, though Watergate, frankly, is nothing compared to what Trump did.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the end, but they were motivated by the same thing, although you could certainly have
they were motivated for political purposes.
Why did you do this, Nixon? You didn't need to. Trump clearly did.
That he committed a stupid crime doesn't change the fact that he committed a crime or authorized and directed a crime. And, of course, he engaged in the cover-up.
You can't plead. My client didn't need to rob the bank. He's already very wealthy. Nevertheless, here he is on video robbing it. Yeah. I know, but the motivation is different. No, it isn't.
Yes. Yeah, and it was about becoming elected president.
Yeah.
And, of course, the abuse of office part of it comes later with the directions to the FBI and the CIA and the implication, the fact that his attorney general was involved in the cover. Obviously, what Nixon did on the cover-up was much worse than the original thing, though both of them were impeachable. But what we have in our hands today, right now, is that the President of the United States committed a felony in order to secure the office.
Yeah.
That's an impeachable offense. That's a high crime and misdemeanor. In a sane world where these things mean anything, and we know Republicans it does not.
Right.
there would have been convened today a select committee on impeachment, on impeaching the president.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
we don't need to know what
had...
Michael Cohen is going to say about Russian collusion or anything else he might say about financial crimes and Russian money laundering, which he will probably be able to say all those things too. Yeah. But we don't need all that yet. We have what we need. It reminds me of when the Lester Holt thing. He said, yeah, I fired Comey because of Russia.
Right.
We got him.
Yeah.
The famous SNL skit. We have him. He should be
right?
subject to impeachment immediately.
Yeah. Yes. And, of course, as others with their eye on other objects in motion are pointing out, perhaps would ordinarily say, for instance, another lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court would now not be in order.
I think that argument, I'll use it because it has some political weight. But I don't think it's particularly logical in this sense. I mean, he's still president. He has the power. We have to remove him.
Yeah.
If I think it's a good argument. It's a good political argument. I think there's many reasons to reject Brett Kavanaugh. He also lied under oath. And if you saw the memo he wrote about to Ken Starr, he seems unfit to be a judge at all, to me. Yeah. What kind of person writes that memo?
I was surprised by that one. I didn't end up taking up the issue, but I was particularly struck by. I guess we're talking about the same memo where he says that he insists that he's bent over backwards to try to see the issue fairly for Clinton. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, as far as let's say judicial temperament goes, this is as far as you can go to figure out a theory under which this might not be an issue, or it might not be worth your time, or not worth an investigation. It's interesting. That's the extent of your ability to imagine things from the standpoint of a hypothetical defendant. I don't know if you might not have that temperament.
No, you don't. You're not fit to be. You're not fit to be a district court judge, much less a Supreme Court judge.
I mean, you just told me this was your greatest effort ever.
Was proven unfit to me. I don't need a process reason or reason connected to Trump being his nominee. The man himself is unfit I think he should be impeached from his appellate court position. To be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
Let me go further. Not only should he not be on the Supreme Court, he should be removed from the current judgeship he has.
For having lied during that confirmation hearing?
During his confirmation.
Right. Yeah,
yes.
Well, that is that would be outside a period of good behavior.
That
I would say
is not good behavior, and I would connect it to the process of how he became that judge.
Yes.
He lied to this Senate to secure the seat. That's an impeachable offense.
Speaking of which, the Attorney General did the same, and I think there are a few more people that did it as well. The Secretary of Commerce also.
He should be impeached too. Listen.
Secretary of...
I mean, if we believe these things, all these people should be impeached.
Right. If we just believe the one thing, Kavanaugh's memo, should be enough. But
I think that's the basis for rejecting him to the highest court.
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't in his period of good behavior. I don't know how that did not come out, frankly, in his initial confirmation hearings, by the way.
Yeah. We just when was that? What
2006. You may not recall. We were in the middle of the nuclear option threats.
And I would say I would probably say that at that any confirmation that went through during that period or was explicitly a part of the exchange of prisoners, really, at the end of the resolution of the first nuclear option standoff, I would, you could certainly make arguments about it, and one day we probably will be making arguments about it in court about whether or not their approvals, their confirmations to the court are de facto evidence of their thorough vetting or as vetted. They were as vetted as Congress wanted them to be, is I guess the best you could argue. But most of the people who got through in that deal or adjacent deals were rubber stamped. It wouldn't have mattered what their record was. There was a clear bargain. We will confirm these, reject and withdraw the nominations of these two, and let these 5 sail as part of the agreement to not trigger the nuclear option by the Republicans at that point. And so, yeah, I mean, it's pretty serious questions, and I would guess that that's how it never came to pass that anybody asked those questions. It wouldn't matter. We've cut a deal to put him on the bench to escape from this and to get this boot off our throats. It's not that we vetted him and found him to be okay. It's that we didn't vet him because we had a boot on our necks, and to get it off, we approved his nomination. So, side argument there, interesting, but nonetheless, while I've got a pause here, let me just pick up on one of the comments so we can clear something up for one of our listeners who is asking, you guys keep mentioning allocution. What does it mean? You can give a quick Black's Law Dictionary definition.
When a party is pleading guilty to a crime in a plea deal, the court must be assured that the party understands what they're doing, that they state for the record what the facts they are admitting to are, and that is what an allocution is. It's to put it in the context of a first-degree murder. I went to the gun shop. I bought a gun. I saw the guy I wanted to kill. I walked up to him and I put my gun to his head and I shot him.
Yeah, you
deliberately
come into court
with malice aforethought.
And it's not something you fax over to the court. This is the last formal chance to come in here and say, either I did it all to the satisfaction of the court, or you can blow the whole thing up, but then you'll go to trial and lose, and the prosecutors and judges will punish you accordingly.
Most likely, it's not. And once you do it, and this is actually interesting for George Papadopoulos, who makes all these strange, noises on Twitter, and his crazy wife, fiance, whatever she is. Mm-hmm. As if he thinks he can back out of his plea deal. Now, he's in trouble because he didn't cooperate. Yeah. And Mueller's got sick of him, and they want him to go to jail, and they're probably looking for other things to pin on him because he doesn't have a deal that gets him off anything. Mm-hmm. This was basically, here, you sign this, and we'll see how it goes, was the Mueller position. Mm-hmm. Unlike Mike Flynn, who actually has a deal that's firm on everything, but subject to a cooperation requirement. Papadopoulos doesn't have to cooperate, but he also doesn't have anything that he's off of. All he has is a plea deal on the lying to the FBI part of it. So how does he get out of his plea agreement? He can't. There's got to be some exceptional circumstance. That's why you do allocutions. Because wait a second, you stood here in court under oath and said you did all these things.
Yeah.
How do you get out of that? You can't. The judge said, well, what happened? Well, I lied to you under oath before, Your Honor. I didn't do any of those things.
Yeah. Well, then you're in trouble for that.
Guess what you just did?
Yeah.
You just confessed to a new crime.
That locks you in, more or less.
You're pretty much locked in.
Yeah.
There's got to be something exceptional about ineffective counsel or something that's different.
And it was Lanny Davis. I mean,
well, no, not Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen is fine. Michael Cohen got a good deal.
Yeah,
I don't think he would walk away from that deal in a million years.
Yes, that's true. So I guess that clears up what allocution is. And by the way, the fact that there was the allocution and what goes on there is what renders the idea that what he admitted to were not crimes ridiculous on its face. If you come into court and attempt to allocute to things that are not crimes, judges will say, I'm sorry, sir, this is a McDonald's drive-through. What are you doing here? Basically, you can't allocate, you can't plead to, well, the other day I took candy from a baby. All right, well, I mean, I guess you could charge you with with larceny there, but we haven't. But yeah, the idea that you could come into court and plead guilty to things that aren't crimes and have a judge say, great, done deal, yeah, that's not what it's all about. The fact that there was an allocution erases that claim entirely. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. All right, well, let's call it that we're back in from break now. People have heard us trailing. That's okay. I really honestly don't care about talking over the end of the break. Sometimes I try to discipline us this way. But look, this is an unscripted show. This is the fun of it. Armando and I were just discussing whether or not we should switch over to the hilarious Duncan Hunter story, which is always a good idea, or stick to what we've been. And I think we got a few more minutes probably where we could make observations not clearly reported or enunciated in the press about any of the cases really, but the two big ones yesterday. I think you're getting more out of our time on that than laughing at Duncan Hunter, as much fun as that will be.
I'll just make one last note. It's on Cohen, and then I'll give you a brief thoughts on the Manafort thing. But the Cohen thing, I think that what amazes me still is just the coverage. Even someone like Rick Hasen, who knows the campaign finance laws very well and is obviously very able legal mind, talks about, and he wrote a good article in Slate. I don't have the link, but you might want to take a look at it at some point. He walks you through what the issues are. And he says, well, if they have corroborating evidence of what Cohen said in his allocution about the campaign finance piece, then Trump is really in big trouble. And to me, I say, hello, Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah. He
corroborates everything Cohen said. Now, I imagine there's documents and whatnot too, but and Judd Legum, I believe, did a thread on all the corroborating evidence that we know of publicly that corroborates Cohen's story. But the fact is, we knew what Cohen did the whole time after, almost immediately. We knew that he had created Essentials LLC. We knew that was a problem. We knew that he did it in October. We knew all the issues that arose about the exceeding by 30 times the limit of campaign finance limits, but actually 50 times, not 30 times. But the fact is that on May 2nd, that whole panorama changed, and we forgot. And today, people should remember. It's going to be key. May 2nd, 2018, Rudy Giuliani sunk his client, Donald Trump, on this. Now, you'll notice when you looked at the Twitter tweet of Trump, that one tweet he sent is really smart for once. He said that, and I know it sounds ridiculous, and you laughed at it, but that Cohen pled guilty to something that isn't a crime. Yeah. That's got to be his argument, because he's tied into it. His attorney, Rudy, put him in there before he could say, I didn't know what the guy was doing. Well, it has nothing to do with me. But Rudy said, no, it does have everything to do with you. You did know about it. You did tell him that he could do it. You basically said, do what you got to do. So Trump is there. So now what he has to say is what happened isn't a crime. So that's really where I think is interesting, because I don't think there's, on that point, how much more factually are we supposed to know? I guess if there's a recording of them talking about it, of course, that's good color and it's good for politics, but it doesn't change the essential facts. Now, to switch over to Manafort, Manafort was one of the more interesting cases you'll see. And one of the things that's most striking, and I know the day after people are forgetting this, but this judge was awful. He should be removed from the bench. What he did was just, I mean, he's too old, possibly. Maybe that's what it was. But people say he acts like that all the time. That's not acceptable, how he acted. Now, there was a hung jury on 10 counts, and some of those, frankly, you can almost attribute directly to the judge.
Yes, in some ways.
Because they were about stuff that the judge said, this is nothing. What are you doing? Move it along. That's not a crime. So what's the jury going to do?
By the way, that's what judges do when they're confronted with things that aren't crimes. They don't allow.
Oh, exactly. That's
they don't allow that to proceed.
Too. No, but actually what you do is there's a motion to dismiss. If that's not a crime, you dismiss it.
Right.
That's what you're supposed to do. But this judge was terrible and awful. At any rate, he was convicted of 4 counts of tax evasion. Trump, in his tweet on Manafort, said, this decade-old investigation of Paul Manafort. Well, just for the record, the tax counts are for the filings that Manafort made between 2011 and 2015. They weren't a decade ago. They were within the statute of limitations. If they were a decade ago, there would be a statute of limitations defense, which I believe is 7 years on tax claims. So that didn't wash. And then, of course, there was the bank loan one where he changed the numbers on his reporting. That was the famous flipping the PDF. He couldn't convert PDF to Word.
Yeah.
You remember that? He went to jail because of that. Because he did not know how to convert PDF to Word.
Right, I need you to do this for me.
Yes, that was the one. Literally, that is why he went to jail. I mean, that's why he got convicted on that count. And that was the most serious count, by the way. That's the one that carries 30 years.
All right.
So the moral of the story, learn how to convert PDF to Word, people.
Yes, right, please.
That way you won't go to jail.
Yes, and all of this is out there on the record. You know how to escape these charges. The fact that you didn't do it is just lazy lawyering and bad practice.
All right.
Just
before,
like Duncan
before
Hunter.
You switch to Duncan Hunter, I do want to give you one irony for the last time of how Donald Trump is in trouble on this Stormy Daniels and McDougal thing.
All right.
He was too cheap or too poor to pull money out of his pocket and pay the money directly, because he would have had a reporting violation, which is still just not as serious. He can donate, and he did, as much money as he wanted to his campaign.
Yes.
The fact that he was so cheap or so poor that he would not pull out the $130,000 to Stormy Daniels and the $150,000 to McDougal is why he's embroiled in this mess with regard to Cohen.
It's an amazing thing that he didn't do it. And I wondered also whether maybe there was one possible other motivation was he felt like that's how a mob boss does things. You say, have other people do the dirty work so it can't get connected to you. But in this case, of course, doing the dirty work yourself is what would actually keep you out of trouble. But he doesn't know that.
He had a thought that he could pay it in cash on the recording that Cohen released. That related to the McDougal situation, but if he had gone to cash, that's a lot of cash, unless he has it in a safe somewhere where he just pulls it out like mobsters do.
Yeah.
You've got to go to the bank and withdraw it, I guess.
And
I don't know.
Giving her the toilet.
That way you could, I guess, hide that the transaction took place.
Yeah.
But, but having to write a check or a wire, and there's records that it happened.
Yes.
So I don't know. Maybe Trump had cash, but not cash in the bank. I don't know.
But surely he could have come up with it. I would. It really isn't. I mean, in the grand scheme of what he's supposed to have, is of course it's nothing. The question is, does he have any of that stuff?
Let's suppose he doesn't
just,
have it. I mean, he did have
liquid.
$50 million for his campaign.
Yeah.
So he probably had another $1 million for it, at least. So it's just goes to the guy's personality disorder and how he,
I guess so.
stiffs people.
My
and
explanation would have been the same. It's also
and remember the story.
Disorder.
Cohen was pissed because they weren't reimbursing him in the beginning of 2017. He was complaining, "They're not paying me back."
Yeah, well, you work for Donald Trump, man. What did you think was happening here? Yeah, it's an amazing thing all by itself that he just wouldn't, do his own work. Like, what were you busy with? Just get some cash and pay the lady, and it goes
you can
away.
have Cohen run it. Just pay the money.
Yeah, I mean, all right. If you really want to feel mob bossy about it, put it in a suitcase and tell him to deliver that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not certain why he didn't do this. By the way, another note, others reminding me in roundabout ways, both Michael Musson bringing up this point and others I saw tweeting about it yesterday, a related point. Michael was saying, don't forget how they must have violated the law with false statements submitted to the FEC. That's what Dershowitz was going on about today. That, at best, it was a crime that everybody commits when they run for president or for any office. Lots of FEC violations. That's not a big deal. And in a way, that's true. There are lots of FEC
It wasn't
violations.
the same thing. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
I made this point just a minute ago.
Yeah.
That if Trump had just put his money in and failed to report that he donated that money to his campaign, it would be a reporting violation, and it wouldn't be a crime most likely, and certainly not one that would be prosecuted. In that sense, there are reporting violations on everybody's FEC reports.
Yes.
Absolutely true. People get fined $10,000, $20,000, and frankly, that's part of the toothlessness of the system.
Yes, and as I was, I was like tweeting in the middle of everything. I had to get this one out. Is the reason, part of the reason why it's never really regarded as a big deal when you break campaign finance laws is that, one, the FEC is toothless. Even when it decides to do something about it, it's a fine, and that's you're just. Basically, at this point, a good campaign manager would say, when you're making a budget, this is the amount you should budget for FEC violations, and the fine we'll have to pay at the end. If you want to, if you want to come out with a balanced budget. Otherwise, you just pay the fine later and do fundraising to raise the money to pay off that debt. But lots of people do violate those rules, and very rarely is anything done about it. And we should point out that it used to be Don McGahn's old job was making sure that that was the case. He was an FEC commissioner, and it was his job to unify the caucus of Republican-appointed commissioners, never to vote to go ahead with a proceeding, at least against a Republican, so that they could never get the necessary 4-vote majority to proceed with an investigation against one of them. So it used to be Don McGahn's old job to make sure that, as Alan Dershowitz says, you never get in trouble for FEC violations, so that later, I mean, I don't know if that's what they had in mind, but the upshot of it is now Alan Dershowitz can go on and say they never punish people for FEC violations, so that must mean it's not a crime. And so nothing involved in any of this, even if it has nothing to do with the FEC, is a crime, and we can all go home now, except that was, one, not true, and two, part of another aspect of the various bits of collusion and conspiracy going on in the larger political world. Don McGahn made sure no one who put an R after their name anyway would ever get in trouble for campaign finance violations. And now that's supposed to mean that they're not crimes. No, it means that Don McGahn committed crimes along the way to cover up for the crimes that other people committed and Alan Dershowitz waved away.
Yeah, I mean, what's to say about Alan Dershowitz at this point? But the McGahn piece is most interesting in that obviously McGahn could have kept the hush money payment within the bounds of FEC requirements, but obviously he wasn't in on the hush money stuff because that was just Michael Cohen and Trump. Nobody else knew. In fact, the reporting now is that the people at the White House are worried because they don't know what Cohen knows.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what he knows.
In terms of Trump's own background, because they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Trump, as you know, Cohen was the conduit to the Russian money for large measure, and he was close with Sater and all the things that remember the famous Sater email to Cohen that we're going to get our boy in the White House, and
we just need to do some crimes.
Apparently they just had to do some crimes. So
and one other thing, maybe I should let you finish your point there.
No, that was it.
But I one thing that I meant to mention and didn't get to is I don't know how it could be rolled into all this, but it's worth thinking about that Michael Cohen, before having to resign from the position, spent some time as National Deputy Finance Chair of the Republican National Committee, and he's now pleading guilty to campaign finance violations and frauds, etc. The entirety of the RNC may be implicated. Man, we need to crack those books open and see, was this a continuing thing? Was this a continuing conspiracy to commit campaign finance fraud? Did he do any on behalf of his, I guess what you might say, his other client, the Republican National Committee, or was this just the exclusive province of his representation of Donald Trump in the Donald Trump campaign? He has a limited number of clients, as we know, and also, I guess I'll just throw out there, lest you think that, he was smart enough to compartmentalize all of his business. He wasn't smart enough to compartmentalize things with respect to the establishment of limited liability corporations, which are created for exactly that purpose. The only reason to have a limited liability corporation is to compartmentalize your liability, and he kept committing multiple crimes for multiple, if not clients, then working partners, using the same LLC. So, and he kept using the same non-disclosure agreement across multiple quote-unquote clients for their sexual dalliances. So I guess the next question is, did he just do the same thing for the RNC that he was doing for Donald Trump? Launder illegal campaign contributions and try to slip them past the FEC on behalf of the people for whom he was working. Since he did that in every other aspect of his so-called legal career, post-election anyway, I don't think it's a hard thing to imagine. But you can disprove it by cracking the books open, RNC. But so I invite you to do that. Why don't we spend the rest of the year looking at that?
Of course, the joke running around is Ronna McDaniel's press release of the campaign the RNC's finance chairs, Michael Cohen, Elliot Broidy.
Yes, the other guy. Right. How many other deputies were there? I wonder if there were others.
There are about 5. There's about 10 all told. But
Ted Bundy is the other one. That's weird. I don't know why they did that. That seems like a bad choice in hindsight. But as you know, hindsight is 20/20. It should not have been done. Oh well. Okay. Well, I think that gives us a lot to think about. Oh, and here's a nice observation here too, by the way. Matthew Rigdon, who says, worth throwing out there, evangelicals would be over the moon with the President Pence. Trump may not be as bulletproof as some think. That might be an interesting play.
I don't think that works, honestly. I think that they're all in for Trump. I mean,
maybe. I mean, what do they care? I mean,
they should be ready to move on from Trump, but they just don't.
Yeah, it would be an interesting thing. It would make for a great political thriller to see them say, all right, so impeach Trump. We'll take a President Pence, and they probably would accept that as a consolation prize. But I don't know if you could push them off of the position that well, we've been all in for Trump. Let's just stay there. But
they
could just say, I
do think it's interesting to see what they do. But I believe, at least what I've seen, they're gung ho. Look, and a lot of them are grifters. You have to understand.
Yes,
so,
and they are not grounded people. They're just not.
And look at a guy like Falwell Jr. is basically just running a scam.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of scams, that Ben Shapiro stuff with the protein energy stuff, that's basically
Is that something he sells?
Yeah, it's funny. He's got the Alex Jones line of products.
Oh, okay.
It's the funniest thing.
I do see
the big intellectual.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of salesmanship going on. Super Beats seems to be the thing that they're all selling. I'm not sure what that is, but all the cool Republican pundits sponsor their shows with that stuff. I don't know what it is, and I'm not likely to find out.
Right.
All right.
Right. So I don't know. I guess you'll leave Duncan Hunter to tomorrow, but I'll give you back your last 10 minutes so you can.
Let's see what we have here. There's a couple
tell
of
us what it all
open.
means.
Oh well, we'll do our best.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Armando.
All right, take care.
Appreciate it. And I mean the Duncan Hunter stuff. I suppose we could try and fit some of it in, but it does deserve a lot longer of a laugh. So maybe what we'll do is go back to the story I mentioned up at the top. The one who's in the most trouble but most thankful for the flood of Republican indictments and allocutions, who I guess would be Vern Buchanan. The reporting here in Capital and Maine, published, I don't know, I'm not sure. Is this David Sirota's own publication, or is he just working there? Sirota and Andrew Perez put this piece together. Top Republican on tax subcommittee received yacht loan from foreign bank lobbying on 2017 tax bill. We might as well throw this in there, the lesser known of the bunch O stories. Federal records show that one of Representative Vern Buchanan's LLCs, how do you like that, financed foreign bank loans to purchase a yacht and a private luxury jet. Wouldn't buy them in his own name. Bought him with an LLC. Smarter, believe it or not, than Michael Cohen. I bet that LLC did very little else other than own those luxury items. As Republicans were finalizing tax cut legislation in late 2017, a foreign-owned bank seeking to shape the bill gave a 7-figure yacht loan to a top Republican lawmaker on the committee writing the measure, according to documents reviewed by Capital and Maine and MapLight. MapLight being their co-publisher in all this, along with the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting. Representative Vern Buchanan, obviously a Republican, obviously also Florida, because Florida, who sits on the House Ways and Means Committee and leads its tax policy subcommittee, has been under fire in recent weeks for purchasing a yacht on the same day he voted for the Republican tax package. Buchanan registered a 73-foot Ocean Alexander vessel named Entrepreneur. Pardon me, and I love the name Entrepreneur. That's what you call a person who takes illegal scam loans from banks that are lobbying you to write tax packages in their favor. Entrepreneur. That's grifter, of course, is a better name for it. But again, I mean, this literally evidence against him. I mean, it's not the most solid stuff, but I mean, it's ideological evidence against him. Remember, these guys think that this sort of grifting, it's not grifting, it's what makes them makers, not takers. I mean, we were just talking about this with respect to Chris Collins the other day. He's, in all respects, it seems, guilty of insider trading. However, it's merely an allegation now, and we don't have not yet convicted him in a court of law. But I said specifically last time when we were talking about Collins, he's insider trading. He's cheating, essentially, to make money and helping his friends and family do the same thing. And both he and his daughter, in many ways, or daughter-in-law, I guess, who became his daughter-in-law, are they still unmarried, fiance at the time? I don't know. Anyway, they clearly think that what they're doing is sharp trading, that they are makers, not takers, that they are entrepreneurs, that they are the movers and shakers, the people doing what's supposed to be being done. The rest of you are leeches and parasites on society. You can tell, their only criteria is, am I rich from it? If so, then what I did was legitimate. Here is a person arranging to break the laws and to break all sorts of ethical codes in order to get a hold of a 73-foot yacht, and I guess also a private jet as well. And he's naming the vessel. He's naming the boat Entrepreneur, as though that's, what he did was he pulled himself up by his own bootstraps and built an empire from which he used to buy this yacht. But he in fact stole the yacht and is naming it Entrepreneur. But that's not the major part of the story. So that's what he did. He bought this thing and he registered it. And let's see, it's linked here, registered. I'm curious, does that take us to the actual registration? And will it tell me where it was registered? Did he register it in America? In other words, did he flag it here in the United States, unlike Betsy DeVos, who sought to evade paying taxes on it by registering in the Cayman Islands? It says the hailing port here is Sarasota, Florida. So I guess that's possible that... I guess that probably means it's American flag. JM Family Associates Limited is the name of the owner. Or, let's see. Is that the owner who was selling the yacht to him? Or what? I can't tell. What was the name of his? There's several things on this page here. So maybe one or the other. Let's see. The hailing port of all of them are American. So I can't tell exactly which deal it was. Let's see. Do they give a date on this thing? It doesn't matter very much. It's American flag. So at least we have that going for us here. All right. Although Buchanan is one of the wealthiest members of Congress. Oh, okay. So I'm sure he claims, well, I was an entrepreneur before. This one was a theft, yes, but I had the money to buy a yacht before, all money being fungible. You can't tell which money I used to pay for this yacht. Anyway, he's worth at least $80 million. Federal records show one of his limited liability companies financed the purchase with a BMO Harris Bank loan worth as much as $5 million. Since 2016, Buchanan's companies have received 3 loans worth as much as $35 million from BMO Harris, which is the American subsidiary of the Bank of Montreal. I didn't realize the Canadians were getting pulled in on this. I was hoping it would be Deutsche Bank or maybe something from Cyprus or Russia for that matter. But okay, Canada, we're on to you. In total, since he was appointed to the Ways and Means Committee in 2010, Buchanan and his companies have received between $17 and $85 million worth of loans from 4 lenders. At the time Buchanan's company received the 2017 yacht loan, BMO Harris was lobbying congressional lawmakers, on tax policy overseen by the Ways and Means Committee, according to federal records. Buchanan received a separate BMO Harris loan for a plane in 2016. Records show that loan, worth between $5 and $25 million, was made around the same time that the bank began lobbying lawmakers on, quote, tax reform proposals. And I think that should be in scare quotes. In all, BMO spent $760,000 lobbying lawmakers in 2017, and records show the bank paid for tax reform lobbying from Tony Podesta. Republicans love that name, hearing Tony Podesta's name getting called, whose firm is being investigated for potential violations of foreign lobbying laws. And I guess this would be foreign lobbying, in that, although it was the American subsidiary of a Bank of Montreal, BMO. Bank of is the O just part of Montreal or what? I don't know. Anyway, in recent years, lending to lawmakers has been a source of controversy, with some critics alleging that politically connected banks can use favorable loan terms as a stealth conduit for political influence. Buchanan did not list the terms of the BMO Harris loans on his 2017 financial disclosure report, which was filed in May, and his office did not respond to questions about the deal. They give the usual excuses for all of that. But both BMO Harris and Buchanan could reap a financial windfall from the tax legislation. The bank's first annual report after the passage of the Republican measure said corporate tax cuts in the bill are expected to increase our annual net income from what it would have otherwise been. I guess they didn't put any numbers to it. But on the bottom line, they can say they spent $760,000 lobbying, but it also cost them a couple extra millions in loans to Buchanan. Who knows whether the man's good for it and whether they'll ever pay him back. But it's a good way to keep it looking like you're not spending all that much if you're only declaring, I guess, your overt lobbying money and not including the loans. Anyway, interesting story. Just thought that one might have slipped through the cracks. We'll return to the theme of corruption. There's nothing else to do tomorrow. And for now, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy picks up the trail from here. Justice Putnam bringing you, I'm sure, these stories. And I can tell you for certain many more. I just won't be able to fit in what all of them are. Let's see if we can find some amazing ones to share.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
There are some rather amazing ones. Here's another lawsuit, a lawsuit brought by Russian oligarchs against Trump Russia dossier author Christopher Steele has now joined the many cases tossed out by a federal court. I guess there's no crime there either. We'll catch up on this and many other stories if you stay tuned to Justice next.